It's 3 p.m. on a hot Tuesday afternoon, and the air in Liberty City, Georgia, is thick with the kind of heat that makes everything feel a little slower. But in the heart of the police station, it's the simmering tension that holds the room at a standstill. No one knows it yet, but the smallest of acts will soon spark a shift that no one saw coming. A slap, just one slap, and everything will change. Stay with us to see what unfolds next. Lieutenant James Jimmy Burnside wasn't a rookie, but his attitude said otherwise. At 25, he was still new to the force, having joined the Liberty City Police Department straight out of the academy. Raised in a small town, his upbringing had been shaped by conservative values. But in his mind, that meant one thing above all: authority and dominance. He was the kind of cop who believed in using his badge to make a point, to show those he deemed beneath him who was in control. His behavior wasn't just cocky, it was downright hostile, especially toward people of color. He'd earned the nickname White Lightning on the streets because of his quick temper and brutal way of policing. He wasn't just enforcing the law, he was above it. A tough guy, fresh off his first taste of power. He was proud of his rank lieutenant, though he'd barely earned the respect of anyone above him, let alone his colleagues. The older officers often whispered about his methods, but Jimmy didn't care. The badge on his chest told him he could do anything he wanted. Meanwhile, across town, Tyrone Okafor, 40, was busy finishing a long day of work at his auto repair shop. A Nigerian immigrant who had made a home for himself and his family in Liberty City, Tyrone had worked his way up from nothing. He had a wife, Angel, and 2 kids, Aisha and Jordan, who were the lights of his life. He had always been the man who kept his head down, focused on providing for his family, keeping out of trouble. But trouble had a way of finding him, and today, it would come in the form of Lieutenant Jimmy Burnside. It started with a routine traffic stop. Tyrone had been driving home after a long shift at the garage when his tail light burned out. Just a small oversight, but in Liberty City, small oversights often led to bigger issues. As Tyrone pulled into a gas station to get gas, Burnside's squad car rolled in right behind him. "You're not supposed to stop here," Burnside barked as he stepped out of his car. "What do you think this is? A safe zone for criminals?" Tyrone, never one to engage in conflict, calmly explained the issue with his tail light, showing Burnside the expired receipt for his repair. But Burnside, having no interest in listening, decided to escalate the situation. "Save the excuses. You people always think you can talk your way out of everything." The racial undertones were clear. Tyrone, taken aback, bit his tongue. He had learned a long time ago that fighting fire with fire could be a dangerous game. But Burnside wasn't done yet. "You think just because you're in a mechanic shop you get to break the law? Get over here. I'm writing you up for this, and I'll throw in a couple of other charges while I'm at it." Tyrone tried to keep his composure, but Burnside was in his face now, pushing him further than he should have gone. "I told you I didn't break any law. I'm not doing anything wrong." Burnside sneered. "Yeah, you're all the same. You think you're entitled to everything. Get in the car." The crowd at the gas station started to gather. They were used to seeing Burnside treat people this way. But today, Tyrone had had enough. He wasn't going to take it anymore. Not in front of his children, not in front of his community. "You want to put me in the car?" "Go ahead," Tyrone said, his voice steady. "But I won't let you disrespect me." And just like that, Burnside snapped. In one swift motion, he slapped Tyrone across the face. The slap rang out sharp and public. Tyrone's head jerked to the side, his cheek stinging from the impact. The crowd fell silent. Some of them reached for their phones, others looked away, ashamed to be witnessing it. But the real humiliation wasn't in the slap. It was in the way Burnside grinned afterward. He knew no one would stop him. Tyrone, humiliated and stunned, stood frozen for a moment. Then he turned, walking away, his hands trembling. Burnside laughed, expecting to walk away from this like every other time. He was untouchable, right? But what he didn't know was that the crowd wasn't just watching, it was recording. And in the background, the news was about to spread. The following day, things escalated quickly. A crowd had gathered at the police station, their phones still buzzing with clips from the previous day's incident. Burnside walked into the station, thinking he was about to get away with it, when he was stopped by Sergeant Thompson, a grizzled veteran who had seen his fair share of misconduct. "Jimmy," Thompson said, his tone low, "there's a meeting upstairs. You might want to sit in on it. The chief's not happy." The police chief, Chief Ernest Jacobs, was an old-school, no-nonsense leader. He had risen through the ranks the right way, earning respect with every step. When the video of Burnside's slap surfaced, it made national news. The whole town was watching, and so was Jacobs. But what Burnside didn't know was that his actions would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. As Jimmy stood there in the hallway, waiting for his fate, he felt a sharp chill. He couldn't shake the feeling that his time in Liberty City was coming to an end, but he had no idea just how much. "Come in, Burnside," Chief Jacobs's voice echoed from the office. "You've got a lot to answer for." As Jimmy opened the door, the weight of his actions was about to be laid bare, and just as he stepped inside, Jacobs dropped the bomb. "Effective immediately," Jacobs said, looking at Burnside with cold eyes. "You're no longer a member of this department. You're out. Tyrone Okafor is your new boss. He'll be taking over as the chief of police for this precinct." Burnside froze. What had just happened? The door to Chief Jacobs's office slammed shut behind Jimmy Burnside, and the room fell silent. The tension in the air was thick, heavier than anything that had ever been felt in the precinct. Burnside's hands were clammy, his stomach twisted in knots. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something familiar, anything that might help him understand what was happening. But there was nothing. Just the cold, unforgiving eyes of Chief Jacobs, who stood there with his arms crossed, the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. Across town, Tyrone Okafor was just finishing another long day in the auto shop when his phone buzzed. He'd been on edge ever since the incident at the gas station, but he wasn't expecting this. The message was short but blunt. "You're the new chief of police. Get to the station ASAP." For a moment, Tyrone thought it was some kind of joke. He stared at the text, trying to make sense of it. He had just been slapped by a cop the day before, and now he was being told he was the one in charge. The reality of it hit him like a truck. He had been fighting for years, just trying to make an honest living, raise his kids, stay out of trouble. He never imagined something like this could happen to him. But life had a way of surprising people, and Tyrone knew that he couldn't just walk away from this. "Boss, you good?" one of his mechanics asked, noticing the look on Tyrone's face. Tyrone smiled faintly, nodding. "Yeah, I'm good, just I need to head to the station." His wife Angel was just as stunned when he told her. She had seen the video that was going viral, had heard about the slap. But this was something entirely different. "Tyrone, do you even know what that means? Are you ready for that responsibility? You have a family to think about. What about the kids?" Tyrone nodded, but he could see the concern in her eyes. The weight of her words hung in the air. He knew she was right. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted it. But sometimes, when life throws you a chance, you can't just sit back and let it pass. "I have to take this, Angel. For us, for the kids, for everyone. I've been walking on eggshells for too long. Maybe it's time to do something about it." As Tyrone pulled into the station's parking lot, he felt an unfamiliar sense of dread. The building loomed in front of him like a fortress, cold, imposing, a symbol of power and control. But today it wasn't just a police station. It was now his domain. He wasn't the mechanic anymore. He wasn't just a father trying to make ends meet. Today he was the chief of police. The doors opened and Tyrone stepped inside, feeling every pair of eyes on him. The precinct felt different now, even though everything around him looked the same. Officers whispered in the corners. Some of them glanced at him, unsure of how to react. But Tyrone wasn't here to be liked. He was here to make things right. He walked through the halls, his shoes clicking against the tile floor with each step. It felt surreal, like he was watching himself in a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life. When he reached Chief Jacobs's office, the door was already open. Jacobs was sitting behind the desk, his face unreadable. He nodded as Tyrone entered, gesturing for him to take a seat. "Mr. Okafor," Jacobs said, his voice steady. "Or should I say Chief Okafor?" Tyrone chuckled lightly, though the weight of the title still hadn't quite sunk in. "It doesn't feel real, Chief. This is a lot." Jacobs studied him for a moment, then leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "It's a lot for all of us. But you've earned it. The way you handled things yesterday, standing your ground, not backing down, no one expected that. Especially not Burnside. He thought he was untouchable." Tyrone exhaled slowly. "I didn't want it to go down like that, but I had to. You can't keep letting people walk all over you, especially when you've got kids at home watching. They need to see what respect looks like." Jacobs nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. "That's what this department needs right now. Respect. Not just for authority, but for the people we're supposed to protect. And that starts with you." Tyrone sat back in the chair, processing it all. He had never considered himself a man of power, never thought he'd be in this position. But there was something stirring inside of him now, a sense of responsibility he couldn't ignore. He wasn't going to be the same kind of cop that Burnside was. He wasn't going to let the badge turn him into something he wasn't. Word quickly spread through the precinct that Tyrone Okafor was the new chief. Some officers were skeptical, others openly resentful. Tyrone knew that he wasn't going to be everyone's favorite person right away. He wasn't going to be able to just snap his fingers and change the culture of the department. But he wasn't afraid of a challenge. He called a meeting with his officers that afternoon, standing at the front of the room, looking each one of them in the eye. The murmurs died down, and silence settled in the room. "Listen," Tyrone began, his voice firm but calm. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make this department work for the people, not for ourselves. We've got a lot of work to do, and it's not going to be easy. But if you're with me, if you're ready to do this the right way, then we'll get there together." The room was quiet, but the officers were listening. Tyrone could see it in their eyes, their hesitance, their uncertainty. But he wasn't going to back down. Not now. "We're going to hold each other accountable. No more bad behavior, no more excuses. We're going to earn the trust of the community we serve." Tyrone's words were met with silence at first, but then a slow clap from one officer in the back. It was followed by another, then another. The applause spread, tentative at first, then building in strength. Tyrone could feel the shift in the room, the tension melting away. Maybe, just maybe, he could make this work. But Tyrone knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. He had just stepped into a world full of corruption, suspicion, and power struggles. There would be challenges he couldn't even imagine yet. And Burnside, he was still out there, licking his wounds, trying to figure out how to get back at Tyrone. Later that night, as Tyrone sat in his new office, alone, he received an unexpected phone call. It was an unlisted number. "Chief Okafor," the voice on the other end said, low and cold, "You're a dead man walking. You think you've won. You have no idea what you've just stepped into." Tyrone's stomach churned. The voice didn't sound like anyone he knew. Was it Burnside? Was someone else behind this? Before he could ask anything, the line went dead. Tyrone leaned back in his chair, his heart racing. He wasn't just fighting to be a good cop. He was fighting to stay alive. The sun had barely risen over Liberty City, but Tyrone Okafor had already been up for hours. He sat in the small office that now belonged to him, staring out of the window, trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had become his life. He wasn't the mechanic anymore. He wasn't just a husband and father. He was the chief of police now, and with that title came a responsibility that weighed heavier than he ever expected. The phone call last night still echoed in his mind. The voice on the other end, low, threatening, was like a warning. But Tyrone didn't back down. He couldn't. Not after everything he had worked for. He had worked his whole life just to be treated like anyone else. He wasn't about to let anyone take that away from him now. When Tyrone walked into the station that morning, the atmosphere was different. The officers were still getting used to him, but there was something else in the air, something darker. A subtle sense of resistance, like the department was holding its breath, waiting for him to make a wrong move. But Tyrone wasn't new to the feeling of being an outsider. He had faced it before. When he first moved to the United States, he had been the foreigner, the other. And even now, here in Liberty City, he was still seen by some as an outsider. But that didn't matter to him. What mattered was making this department something people could be proud of. What mattered was showing them that a man's worth wasn't in his title or his skin color, it was in his character, his actions. As he walked through the station, he could feel the eyes on him. Some were curious, some were skeptical, and others, well, they didn't hide their disdain. He could see the way they looked at him, the murmurs in the background. The older officers, the ones who had been here for years, were reluctant to accept him. They didn't like the change he represented. They didn't like being told they had to change their ways. Tyrone had known this would happen. He wasn't naive. But that didn't mean it didn't sting a little, especially when he was doing what he thought was right. By mid-morning, the station was buzzing. A domestic dispute had just been reported, and officers were gearing up to respond. Tyrone knew that this was going to be his first real test. The department was full of politics, backroom deals, and grudges, but how he handled this situation would show everyone what kind of chief he was going to be. He was assigned to go with Officer Samantha Sam Rodriguez, one of the few officers who seemed to be genuinely open to working with him. Sam had been on the force for 6 years and had earned her reputation as one of the most reliable officers in the department. Tyrone respected her, and he knew she didn't see him as the outsider many others did. But that didn't make him any less anxious. This was the real deal, the kind of call that could change everything. They arrived at the house in minutes. It was a small, run-down neighborhood on the outskirts of Liberty City, quiet, almost too quiet. As Tyrone stepped out of the car, he noticed the tension in the air. The windows were drawn, the front door slightly ajar. A woman's voice could be heard arguing from inside, the words muffled but sharp. "Stay sharp," Sam said quietly, her eyes scanning the area. This could get ugly. Tyrone nodded, the weight of the badge on his chest suddenly feeling heavier. The last thing he wanted was to make a mistake. He couldn't afford it. They approached the door, and Tyrone knocked, his hand steady. A few seconds later, the door creaked open, and a woman appeared in the doorway. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling. "It's him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's going to hurt me again." Tyrone could see the fear in her eyes, and it made his heart ache. He had seen too many stories like this, growing up in a place where violence was all too common. But he wasn't going to let that happen here. He wasn't going to let this woman's life be torn apart. "We're here to help," Tyrone said, his voice calm, steady. "We're going to take care of this. Just tell us what happened." Inside the house, things were already escalating. The man who was causing the trouble was pacing back and forth in the living room, his face red with anger. Tyrone took a deep breath, trying to keep his nerves in check. This wasn't about him. This was about doing what was right. "Sir, we need you to step outside," Tyrone said, his voice firm. "We're here to sort this out." The man turned, his eyes narrowing. "What's a black guy like you doing telling me what to do?" He scoffed, his fist clenching at his sides. "You think you're some kind of big shot now that you've got that badge? You're nothing." Tyrone could feel the sting of the words, but he didn't let them show. He had heard worse. He had lived through worse. But this time it wasn't just about him. He had a duty to uphold. "I'm here to protect her," Tyrone said, his voice unwavering. "You can either walk out on your own, or we can escort you. The choice is yours." The man took a step forward, his jaw clenched. Tyrone didn't back down. He stood tall, eyes locked on the man's, waiting for the next move. Just as things were about to escalate, Sam stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "I don't do this. We can all walk out of this peacefully. Just take a step back." For a moment, the man hesitated. The situation hung in the balance, But then he saw the resolve in Tyrone's eyes and took a step back. The power had shifted just like that. Tyrone had taken control not with brute force, but with dignity and strength. He had earned this moment. As they left the house, the woman thanking them quietly behind them, Tyrone could feel the weight lifting from his shoulders. This was what it was about. This was why he had fought so hard to get here. But as they pulled back into the station, a message popped up on his phone. It was from the unknown number again. "Just wait, Chief. You think you've won. This is only the beginning." Tyrone's gut twisted. He hadn't expected things to be easy, but the message confirmed it. Burnside wasn't going to back down. And there were others in the shadows, watching him, waiting for him to slip up. But Tyrone wasn't afraid anymore. He had a family to protect. He had a community to protect. And he wasn't going to let anyone or anything tear that away from him. Later that night, Tyrone sat in his office, thinking over the day's events. As the hours dragged on, he heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, he found Officer Sam standing there, her face serious. "We need to talk," she said, her tone urgent. "There's something you need to know. It's about Burnside and some people in this department. They're planning something, Tyrone." Tyrone's heart sank. He wasn't just fighting Burnside anymore. He was fighting a system. As the days passed, Tyrone Okafor's life as chief of police in Liberty City began to take shape. He wasn't just the man who had replaced Burnside. He wasn't just the first black chief of the department. Tyrone was the man who stood up when things were wrong, who wasn't afraid to fight for what was right even when it was hard, even when the odds were stacked against him. The threats continued. The whispers behind his back never stopped, and Burnside's shadow loomed large. But Tyrone didn't falter. He held his ground, earning the respect of those around him, one decision at a time. And while the road wasn't easy, his choices were always driven by the same goal: to make Liberty City a place where everyone could feel safe, respected, and heard. When the dust finally settled, Burnside was out, and the department had begun to change. Tyrone had done more than just take over a title. He had taken responsibility. He had proven that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And that made all the difference. You don't have to settle for what life gives you. You have the power to change your circumstances, to stand up when others would rather you sit down. Your actions, your character, will define who you are. And in the end, it's not about the badge you wear, it's about the person you choose to be. This story isn't just about Tyrone's rise to power. It's about resilience. It's about the courage to stand in the face of adversity, to challenge systems that seem too big to fight, and to remind ourselves that no matter where we come from or how hard the fight is, we are capable of making a change. Tyrone's journey teaches us that no matter how many times life knocks you down, it's never too late to stand back up. The people around you might doubt you. They might try to break you down. But if you hold firm to your values and keep pushing forward, you can break through the noise, just like Tyrone did. Remember, it's not the title that makes you a leader, it's the heart and integrity behind your actions. If you found Tyrone's story inspiring and want to hear more tales of courage, justice, and transformation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Like, comment, and share this story with those who need a reminder that they have the power to change their own world.